Alright, so that was the slide we finished on yesterday. This is the one we'll be starting with today. Now, we talked about how the Stuarts and the Tudors were really different and how they dealt with parliaments. And you might remember, we told that story yesterday about the wonderfully awkward Christmas party of Henry V and how his family was responsible for the signing of Magna Carta. That's going to play a role here because once Elizabeth dies, she leaves no heir. So the crown passes to her next closest relative, which is actually a cousin whose last name is Stuart. So we have a new dynasty. And whereas the Tudors were good at involving Parliament in their decisions, the Stuarts are not. They are very much of the absolute monarchy mentality, and that basically is, I do what I want. I don't need to explain myself to you. I don't need your approval. I'm the king. I do what I want. And the problem with this mentality is that, as we've established, Magna Carta limits a monarchy. It, by definition, isn't absolute in England. So by the Stuarts attempting to make the monarchy absolute, they are going to be putting themselves at odds with the Parliament, and that's ultimately going to culminate in the English Civil War. But the first Stuart king is named James. And the big problem he has is expenses, the cost of having a court that is to be the envy of the world. Remember, Louis kind of setting a precedent, but he by no means is the only one spending a fortune on, having lavish parties and things like that. In addition, James is going to find himself in a religious war where he is going to need the support of the Parliament, and basically they refuse to do so. And this really comes down to taxes. So on December 31st in 1610, James is going to dissolve the Parliament illegally, and he's going to begin collecting taxes of his own. This is going to set a precedent for future Stuart kings, specifically Charles I, to almost have the yo-yo Parliament effect. They're in one day, they're out another, as he needs them. And eventually they're going to grow sick of this, and that's what's really going to cause the wars. Not so much the fact that there's arguing, the fact that he keeps trying to get rid of them. Imagine what would happen in the United States if the president decided to get rid of the legislature. It said there's no Congress, there's no House of Representatives. There would be an absolute, well, first, it wouldn't work because the president doesn't have that kind of power. Second of all, if he tried to, you'd have a revolution. I mean, there's no way that that would work. So ultimately, this is going to be pretty much the same thing. You're going to have a situation where you have a whole different mentality. And again, Parliament isn't really interested in the same things that the king is interested in. I mean, it's not always. So the Parliament, in many cases, are interested in their own power. And in a lot of cases, the king wants to have these grand victories. And it's actually kind of an interesting kind of relationship, because what happens if the king goes to war and he has massive victories? How do the general people feel about that? How do people feel when your sports team wins? They feel good, yeah? It's your superiority over another country. In a lot of cases, it means more money. So this is great, People are excited about victories. That makes kings very popular, which makes it harder for Parliament to do something about them. On the other hand, if you lose wars, or if you're fighting wars that people don't see the point in, you lose this. So it's all a game in a lot of ways about seeing who can come out looking the best. And ultimately, Charles is going to lose. The other thing we have to understand in regards to the war itself is that the war is basically divided between the two houses of Parliament. In Parliament, you have the House of Lords and you have the House of Commons. So which of those two houses do you think is going to support the king? The House of Lords, right. The House of Commons, on the other hand, is pretty much everyone else. So it's basically the king and his nobles against the entire rest of the country. Now, here's why this is a major problem. Militarily, up until this point, the importance, the heaviest hitters, the biggest players on the battlefield have really been knights and nobles. People who have been trained to use military techniques of the time to their utmost, cavalry, this sort of thing. Well, the firearm begins to change that. Slowly but surely, the importance of having this ability to fight from horseback is not going to matter as much, because the simple fact is while horses are very good at running down people, if you have muskets well protected by pikes and swords, there's nothing cavalry can do about it. So what's going to happen is the nobles have this military advantage, and they basically are like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. But once that starts to change, and we have the introduction of these new militaries, this new impetus on foot soldiers, really it becomes less important to have these nobles. I mean, think about today, the nobility that you have in the monarchies throughout Europe and the world. Do they really control, like, the army? No, absolutely not. Doesn't mean they don't fight in the army, but it's not like they're, like, at the forefront just wading through people. It's technology is the great equalizer. So in a lot of ways, this is going to change politics, because the need for this elite class starts to kind of vanish, and so you have a change into a more democratic system. The idea comes down to this. Who is it really that has all the power in a government? Who really controls that? Not really. Because money and power and prestige are all inventions, all things we've created. It means nothing. When it gets right down to it, we have all the power. Consider this for just a moment. Let's say there's a revolution in the United States today, and everyone who was not in the army rose up and grabbed whatever weapons they could and fought against the army. Who wins? Not any way, shape, or form could the army win. Because think of it this way. What percentage of the American population is actually in the army? Less than 1%. So they're outnumbered 100 to 1. That's also excluding the fact that the army is made up of citizens. This is assuming they're just like, hey, I'll shoot at my friends and family, no big deal. That's not how it would go down. Even if there was this massive revolution, which is a huge, huge if. My point is, the powers we give the government are there in place because the alternative is worse. We give up certain rights to live in this country, to live in a democracy, for the sake of protection, essentially. Because think about it this way. If we had absolute freedom, total anarchy, there's no government, no one can tell us what to do, that would be terrifying. Because then the only way to protect yourself is if you can protect yourself. There's no police, no one's going to save you, there's no army. The only reason you can keep the stuff you have is you can kill anyone who tries to take it from you. Think American Wild West. Everyone carries a gun for a reason. That's anarchy. So we don't have to deal with that. We give up certain freedoms, say, like, a police officer can pull us over the side of the road. This is where we create laws. We create limits on our freedoms that are reasonable. John Locke wrote about this, and he called it the social contract. We have an agreement with the government that, yes, we're giving this power, and in return you do these things for us. But the question is what happens whenever the government violates that agreement? Well, that's when we're going to have a revolution on our hands. But this is the idea of democracy. This is where it comes from. This idea that we are giving these powers away, and we agree to it. Because let's be honest, there are some things that are laws that we all kind of say, yes, that should be a law, but at the same time we just kind of ignore. You guys know what the number one most commonly broken law in the United States is? The speed limit. Good. Almost no one goes the speed limit. I remember my driving instructor in high school saying, go 5 miles over the speed limit.
Can't you do that?
That's the speed of traffic. No. You can still get pulled over for that. Now, you could go fight the ticket and argue that the radar that they used was faulty, and usually that'll get off because, if it's like 2 miles per hour, well, it could have been, and so, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but they still might stick it with you anyways. The truth of the matter is a lot of police won't chase you. Not all, some will, but a lot will just leave it alone because if they give you a ticket, they have to spend however much of their time, and the ticket's only like, maybe $100 or something. It's basically not worth the effort. There's a better use of time. If someone's going 200 miles per hour, though, you betcha they're going to chase you down. Yeah.
Would it be like a violation of the social agreement for like the government to like spy on like our phone calls and stuff like that?
That's an interesting question. It depends on whether or not we think we should do that.
Well, a lot of people were upset that when that one guy came out.
True, Edward Snowden. It's a good point. And ultimately, the government is paying the price for that. But at the same token, it depends on how we view things. Because the interesting thing is, Edward Snowden is a traitor by definition. He violated his oaths to hold these secrets true, and basically told the world. Now, does that mean that he should be executed or put on trial? Or does it mean we, the people, agree with what he did and say, you're technically wrong, but we're not going to do anything about it? You see what I'm saying? Just because we have a law doesn't necessarily mean we're going to enforce it. That's the other thing that's funny. Because we have all these laws, but what if no one bothers to actually punish anyone for it? So that's the other kind of delicious layer of flavor that makes up this wonderful chocolate and vanilla parfait that is the American government. That was a terrible analogy, my goodness. Anyhow, but it's you bring about an interesting question. The fact is anything is legal until we say it isn't. And that's actually kind of one of the funny things is. One of the things we talked about up in here, the Petition of Rights, 1628. This is akin to our Bill of Rights. Do you guys know why it is we have a Bill of Rights? Like, why did they come up with that in the first place? Doesn't the Constitution grant all these freedoms and everything? Kind of, but it's really sort of vague. Like, for instance, if I say you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, what does that mean? What if your idea of happiness is juggling geese? Geese are juggled. What if you drop a geese or a goose and it happens to break a wing? Is that fair? I don't know. Maybe your idea of fun is setting people's houses on fire. So this is an interesting question of what are rights and what can you do and what can't you do. That's what the Bill of Rights is. It explains these things. With Parliament, they, in order to come back and help out Charles, they say, okay, we'll do it, but you've got to sign this. And basically it states, these are the rights and protections that you can't take away. And one of the most important of these is the writ of habeas corpus. You guys, anyone know what the writ of habeas corpus is? Okay, the writ of habeas corpus is your right to not be thrown in jail without a trial or without a reason. So, the police can't just throw you in jail. They can hold you for questioning for a certain period of time, or they can try you. That's their only options. Otherwise, it is a violation of one of your civil liberties. So, the writ of habeas corpus, the reason it's important is in these times when you didn't have it, kings would basically just imprison people they didn't like. Think about it this way. If you talk back against the king or try to do something, they'll just throw you in jail and make you disappear for the rest of your life. He never has to let you go. So the writ of habeas corpus was being used against parliaments if anyone stood up against the king, he'd imprison him. So this was a protection that Parliament wanted in order to work with him. And then once he got what he wanted, he started violating it again. So basically, he was content to leave Parliament disbanded, but he needed them to raise taxes. Specifically, whenever he fights against the Scots, the Calvinists, he needs that money, so he brings back the Parliament, only this time they say, we're not leaving again. So when he tries to disband them after he gets his money, they refuse to leave. They decline to leave the building. In addition, they take it one step farther and start putting on trial the ministers that he has appointed, his friends, who are not necessarily the most honest politicians, and has them tried as traitors and executed. This is seen as an attack directly on the king, so he raises his army and goes to attack the Parliament building. And you talk about government shutdowns. The government rebels, and we have the English Civil War. So the House of Commons is fighting for their life against the king and his supporters that are in the House of Lords. Does that kind of make sense? Now, ironically, eventually, some of the House of Lords switch sides once they realize that things are not quite going the way they wanted to. But at first, it's kind of divided along this. It's also a cultural thing. You see, the House of Lords was made up of individuals that were part of this cultural element that was called Cavalier, the Cavalier attitude. In fact, the side that fights against the Parliament is known as the Cavaliers. The parliamentary forces, led by Oliver Cromwell, that makes up the House of Commons, are called the Roundheads. It's basically the War of the Hats. They're both named after hats that they wore. But Cavalier was also an attitude. Cavaliers kind of had this idea of devil may care. You're above everything. Nothing worries you. We're going to fight to the death. Sounds great. Just this kind of I don't even care attitude. It actually comes partially from hunting and dueling culture. You see, how many of you guys know anything about dueling in history? Heard anything, seen in movies, things like that? Well, here's the deal. First of all, the nobility really believed in the sense of honor. And it was literally something that really kind of was wrapped in reputation as well as, how you behave and all these different types of things. And so behavior and all this sort of stuff, it was your social status in essence. So if someone insulted you, it wasn't just a matter of them saying words, it was them attacking your social credit. And so you had to react to that. And one of the ways that could happen is you would challenge someone to a duel. This actually goes back to the Middle Ages of trial by combat. Specifically amongst the nobility, these guys are warriors, and they demanded the right, if someone said that they had committed a crime, they say, I'll fight whoever accused me and let God decide. So if I kill the accuser, that means that I'm not guilty. Makes a lot of sense, right? Not at all. It doesn't at all, but it was great for them because they were really good at fighting and basically kept them from being thrown in jail. So it was kind of this excuse they used. But it kind of transformed this right of salving one's honor if they were insulted. So basically what would happen is if someone insulted you, when you challenged them to a duel, you would pick a place and a time where then you would fight. And you would set the rules ahead of time. So for instance, what weapons are we using? Swords. Eventually it would be guns. And then to what are we fighting? So for instance, if we're using swords, you could fight to the blood. The first person to prick the opponent to draw blood on them, they win. Or are we fighting to the death? All these are possibilities. In fact, in some cases, duels became so problematic and happened so often that certain kings actually made it illegal because so many people were dying in duels. The other thing is, you had a second who would back you up. The second, in media, is often portrayed as the guy who would fight for you in case you died. But that's really not the case. The second was there to make certain that your weapons were in order. So basically, it was they were sort of the referees, and so it was a fair fight. And this dueling culture, you could say no, but it would then reflect poorly on your own honor, your own social credit, so to speak. So it was really in your best interest to say yes. Now, what's interesting is when guns came into it, there was this other thing that would happen sometimes where if you wanted to prove a point but not actually risk shooting the guy, you would take your pistol and shoot into the air instead of shooting at the other person. I forget the president, but there was a president in a duel. It was Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. He did that and shot in the air, and then the other guy just shot him right in the chest. So it's kind of like, oops, he kind of misjudged that one, I guess. But it actually killed him too. So it was an issue. Believe it or not, there is still a law in the Kentucky books that you cannot hold public office if you've ever been in a duel. So, true story, bro. Any old who. So, this cavalier attitude, yeah. Well, they're going to fight against the Roundheads, which, to explain that, we have to understand the type of warfare it's going to be using. They are going to be utilizing foot soldiers, using muskets, pikes, and swords. So sort of similar to the tercia. And they are going to be utilizing this new impetus on foot soldiers because they really don't have another choice. So they're changing the way people have fought. And what we're going to see come out of this is the military tradition of Europe changes to reflect this new impetus on foot soldiers. Oliver Cromwell creates this, what he calls a new model army based on this new method of fighting, and he's going to train them in these new tactics. Now, first they lose, as the Cavaliers have sort of a military advantage, but eventually they start to prove themselves and start to win battles, and eventually capture Charles I himself on the battlefield, and that pretty much wins them the war. So it starts slow but works better. Now, another thing. The name Oliver Cromwell. You might remember the name Thomas Cromwell. He is actually his great-grandfather. Thomas Cromwell was one of the prime minister, essentially. He was the Lord Chancellor of Henry VIII whenever he was married to Anne Boleyn and kind of throughout the marriage of Anne of Cleves. He was eventually executed by Henry. So he was an important person in the government. And he was featured in the video clip I showed you at the beheading of Anne Boleyn. You might remember there was a part where it had a guy in a church who was kneeling, like really upset. That was Thomas Cromwell. So just kind of a little interesting factoid there. But the Cromwell family is going to kind of continue this important role in the government. And Oliver Cromwell, he is a leader. He is charismatic. He is the type of person who really controls the government. That being said, he's really a military dictator. Once he gains control of the government, he sets himself up as Lord Protector. And it kind of, we understand why, and we'll get to that why here in a minute, but in the end, he really kind of controls the government. We'll just put it that way. So Cromwell is going to be successful in defeating the Cavaliers and sets up England to change dramatically. Because what happens next is something that had never happened before in the Western world. They capture their king, put him on trial, and find him guilty of the crimes of being a tyrant and a traitor to England. And he is executed, beheaded in front of a sellout crowd. Now consider this. It was already a public spectacle to go see an execution. Imagine a king being executed by his own people. This had never happened before. This was something that was history in the making. So there are broadsheets, there are newspapers, there are little sketches done of the execution that are spread as souvenirs. This is something that is going to capture the imagination of not only the people of England, but throughout Europe. This is going to be something other monarchs are worrying about. And indeed, revolutions are going to start spreading piecemeal throughout Europe for the next 200 years. So this is the thing that starts it. In addition, what this shows is In England, a king is not a power unto himself. The government can't do whatever it wants. Its power is limited by its people. If you don't do a good job, the people will replace you. Okay? That's the will of the people. That's the social contract. We have that same agreement with our own governments. Only we don't really have to worry about a revolution. We can get rid of them in a much more peaceful way by voting them out of office, yes? That's why that system of government was developed. If you look at the Founding Fathers and you look at our system of government, everything made sense based upon the problems of the times that happened directly before and during the times those documents were written. Everything is there for a reason. Every law is made for a reason, which is kind of scary when you think about it, because there's some really crazy laws on the books. There's actually books about it, like, crazy laws and things like that, like the one you're not allowed to chain your pet alligator to a fire hydrant, things like that. For it to be a law, it had to happen. Just think about that. Yeah.
I remember that there was one in Alaska that you couldn't have a moose go parachuting.
Yeah.
That actually makes sense in a way, if you think about it, because moose are big things.
And one other that I remember, I don't remember which state, but it's illegal to have an ice cream cone in your back pocket.
Yeah, that's Alabama.
Why?
Who knows? I mean, like I said, it had to be a problem, but Yeah. If I had to guess, my guess is that somebody probably did that, sat in someone's furniture quite too often and ruined it. And considering that, in the times that we're talking about ice creams coming about, we're not having OxyClean. It can ruin hundreds of dollars worth of furniture. There's probably enough lawsuits that just said, enough, you can't do this. That would be my really crazy half guess. But moving on, this is Cromwell.
Who put ice cream cone in the back pocket?
I just eat the thing personally, but people do weird stuff. These are Cavaliers, and this is a really great image showing the Roundheads. So one of the things that happened was the Roundheads started bursting into people's homes, specifically the nobles, and burning them to the ground. This was a way of throwing off the chains that they saw of slavery that was the old feudal manor system. Now, this shows the attitude really great, because you see these guys in the round helmets, that we talk about the Roundheads. They come barreling into this house, and this old dude with a sword is kind of like, I'd like to see you try. That's Cavalier all the way. It's just like, imagine these guys just pouring in with guns. It's like, go ahead and shoot me. I'll take, and then it's like, because it would be like the movie Taken. He starts taking people's guns from them and shooting them with them and karate chopping them in the head. I mean, I don't know, I would pay to see that movie. But this is just kind of this Cavalier attitude, well placed in a picture. So as I said, he is executed, and that's kind of a big deal. This had never happened before. We're talking about some kind of unsettling times for people as well. I mean, this would be like America having a revolution and changing our government to, I don't know, a government based on the size of your feet, whatever, I don't know. There's some kind of bizarre thing. So these people are like, awesome! I'm in charge! Actually, I don't think so. I think it's a stupid fact. But anyways, moving on. It would just be something that we couldn't really understand. It'd just be like, what do you mean things are changing this much? It's hard to grasp. That's kind of what we're talking about. It's going down. Everything's changing. We have a whole new system. All new things are happening, and we're going to have a whole new world. A whole new world. So don't you dare close your mouth. I heard two guys in high school did that once.
I don't think I've ever heard that song. Are you?
You've
never seen the movie
Aladdin?
Aladdin? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one.
Wait, it's from Aladdin?
Yeah, it's a magic carpet ride.
Oh, yeah. I those kids, those guys that sing. They're
Yeah!
The ones that they did the Disney one.
Yeah, right.
The what?
Maybe that's what I was thinking. It was those guys doing, because these high schoolers doing this, doing all the Disney things.
And they did the thing. I was just thinking about that yesterday, and they did the thing over the. That's pretty cool. It's this acapella group, and they these teenage boys.
Which is funny because this big chubby guy does Jasmine. He does all the girls' voices. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
All right, so this, as I said, is one of the broadsheets that's
I didn't
being
quite
sort
notice
of, one of the broadsheets that's spread out, and it's almost cartoonish in a way, showing the blood spurting out of the king's neck. But I mean, this again, it was a major event, so they would try to remember this sort of thing. All right, moving on. So Parliament, as we said, now controls the government. The House of Commons abolishes the monarchy, the House of Lords, and even the Church of England. It sets itself up as a republic, which is going back to the Romans, like we do, but also it means that there's one group of people really in charge. It is not a democracy. It is not a fair system. This particular republic is still a, what's the word we're looking for? I'll think of it here in a second anyway. But the group in question are the Puritans. Oliver Cromwell is a Puritan. And the Puritans pretty much believed that if it was enjoyable, it was a sin. If it made you happy, it was a sin. Life isn't about having fun. It's not about good stuff. Life is about working towards salvation. So essentially what they wanted you to do was work hard and be pious. And that was it. So anything that was kind of a fun time during that time was basically made illegal. Dance halls were closed. Theaters were closed. Taverns were closed. Everything that people did to have fun was closed. So this was not very popular, but this shows you how popular Cromwell was, because the people put up with it. Once he's dead, though, immediately the people throw off the puritanical government, and they actually welcome Charles II, who's the son of Charles I, back into the crown. And first thing he does is like, party! As everybody opens all the taverns again. It's party all the time. And because he was smart, he knew what he was doing. He didn't want to get his head chopped off. But the other aspect of that is the Puritans are going to be very heavily oppressed, so they end up leaving the country to go find a new world where they can settle it and live their own lifestyle like they want to. And that, of course, would be in the Americas, in North America, the foundation of the United States. Yes?
So it's technically the Puritans' fault for getting kicked out of England?
Kind of, yeah, in a lot of ways. But it's interesting because there's same attitudes you can see in the Americas. Case in point, or if I say the Americas, I mean North America, the United States specifically. Consider this. Are Americans lazy?
Yes.
No. In fact, if you take the number of hours worked per week, we work more than any other Western nation in the world. We take less sick time, we take less vacation, we work longer hours, we work harder hours. Interesting. Case in point. My dad worked for the Postal Service, and for 35 years, I believe he maybe took 2 sick days his entire career. So when he retired, he actually retired a year before he could retire because he took an entire year worth of sick days. That is not uncommon for people. I've heard many stories similar to that. Meanwhile, in Germany, you are not allowed to not take vacation. As in, if it gets down to the last 2 weeks before the new year and you haven't taken your 2 weeks vacation, you are not allowed to come into work. Not that anyone needs to do that, because they just take vacation. They also, I believe, get 6 vacation weeks. We get 2. So, I mean, it's a very different type of thing. And the reason is because our government's founded by Puritans. That attitude is prevalent. Think about it this way. We are really against people wasting time or doing things that we think is a waste of time. Think about it. Saying, like, that's a waste of time is an insult. Call someone a slacker, for instance. Now, I would also argue that we Americans are not lazy by any means. What we are is practical. We like to work smarter rather than harder. So, for instance, this idea of I'm going to do the most work I could possibly do just because I want to do a good job just really doesn't happen that often. Some people are like that. Most people, though, I find, have the attitude of I'm going to do as little work as I can conceivably do. Now, you might call that lazy. I see it as efficient. Because think of it this way. You are doing what is necessary and nothing more. Otherwise, you don't have a benefit. However, let me put it this way. What if you do have a benefit? What if you will say get paid time and a half to work more? Some people will choose to do that, yes? That's where this idea of capitalism sets in. You know, I really do want to be lazy, but on the other hand, if I work a whole lot harder, I'll get more money. So these are the warring, you know, emotions we have, and why we love time and a half so awful much. Heck, I've seen some jobs that offer triple time pay if you work on certain holidays. Well, just ponder that for a second. You're getting paid $10 an hour normally, it gets $30 an hour. Yeah, that's ridiculous. In fact, the last job I had that I was really working for hourly, yeah, I actually had to be careful I didn't work too much, because if I worked too much in a week, I would actually jump to the next tax bracket and lose money because it was collecting taxes. So it's like there's this kind of little game people play about how many hours they're willing to work in certain situations. It's really kind of interesting. Money's an interesting thing for a lot of different reasons. Anyway, so as we said, you know, there's this puritanical government, the banishment of the Irish in the western parts that are Catholic because they're rebellion. And what's interesting is under the Commonwealth, Oliver Cromwell did.
Oh my god.
There you go.
My hand hurts. My hand hurts so.
That is the weakness leaving your hand. It's making you strong.
How much is
So strong.
yeah.
Isn't it so?
I'm dying.
Yeah, the one I tell you what, the one time someone dies because they've taken too many notes in my class, that's the day I'm just like, forget it. Give me everything ahead of time. We're not taking notes at all.
Oh my god.
Why don't I do that? It'd be funny to make you write stuff. That's right. That's right. Now I'm making you strong.
I'm gonna need a new notebook in like a week.
I did warn you about that. That was a possibility.
All the blue is from today.
Nice. Now, I will say this. You won't believe me, but this is one of the things I've had folks come back in college say is that you do take notes. So it is helpful to be able to do it. Because basically when you get to college, you'll take less than you take here. That is true. Yeah. But here's the thing is you'll be so powerful and mighty in your note-taking skills that you're just be like, that's all we took today. And everyone's like, oh, it hurt so much. We didn't know.
Yeah, everyone with the iPad.
That's good. Yes, excellent, excellent. Smash it, make it cry, little tears, and then drank those tears. What? What does he say? I don't know. I'm just kind of going with that analogy.
Being recorded.
Yes.
Oh God.
Oh, the things you will hear. Anyways, that's the other thing is, guys, if you miss some of this stuff, I'm gonna put it on YouTube, really as soon as you guys leave, and once you guys are even if we don't get through the whole thing, I'm still gonna go through the whole slideshow and just comment on a few things, buy my onesies if I have to, so you guys can get it. Yeah. Actually, it won't take me very long. If I was really busted and trying to make it fearless, I could probably tell you everything in this note slide in probably about 10 minutes. Because I have to make you powerful. You will be mighty.
You're cramping on top of our heads. They're always the.
That's why I said the chair. Changing. Look at the sky. Look at the stuff. It's actually funny because the juniors were complaining that we don't do this in the system.
What?
Because with that we do Socratic circle, and that's a little bit different. Basically, it means you read everything and tell me what's going on.
Oh no.
Oh Lord.
I'm not a fan of this.
This is all right.
There you go. So anyways, but yeah, I was kind of talking about the religious freedom thing up here. He believed in everybody having religious freedom except Catholics. Now you might be like, why is he hating on the Catholics? One, this is a continuation of the Protestant Reformation. And two, there's this weird belief amongst some individuals, especially popular back in the past, that Catholics are essentially robots, and the Pope has a big button that he can press and make all Catholics do whatever his bidding is. So, like, if the Pope was like, kill the President of the United States, and just, yes, Master, and just go murder him. Yes, Master. And this is one of the things the KKK believes, for instance. So, I mean, crazy people believe crazy things. Awkward turtle. Oh! I could totally start a slow clap. Oh, wasted opportunity.
That's what they do.
You can't just start a slow clap whenever you want.
Let's do one
Anyway.
now.
So, no, you can't just do it.
Why not?
Duh.
We can pretend like we don't know.
Anyway, so just to kind of summarize a few things. After Charles II, we have James II. And James II once again tries to establish this idea of an absolute monarchy. And he's the last one to really try it. Because once he does that, Parliament, not wanting another civil war but not really wanting to deal with him, basically sends a message to his daughter, Mary, and her husband, William, and says, would you please come be our queen and king, pretty please, with sugar on top? And they say, sure, get their army and sail to England. Well, actually, I don't think they really have to sail now I think about it. But that being said, I want to say I read something like that. Anyway, they come to England. How do they get, they rode a pony, whatever. And unicorn. Flying unicorn magic.
Oh, yeah.
Flying crocodile. Anyways, they get there and they end up taking the government without any bloodshed because he flees to France. That is known as the Glorious Revolution. It's the first bloodless exchange of power in history. In England, especially. All right, guys. Moving ahead, that would be Charles II. And then we have this idea right here, so you guys at home can follow right along.
Oh my god.
And then right over here, we've got Mary. And that would be her husband, William, with his wonderful chains. And then the Restoration, which leads to the English Bill of Rights, the wonderful protections that we have, and last but certainly not least, the Glorious Revolution. Thank you for playing. See you later, TTFN for now.